Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I am so excited today to have my friend Rachel Rainbolt on as our guest. We had such an interesting conversation. The theme of our conversation was about simplicity in the family life and simplicity in our spaces, our relationships, our schedules. We got to so much more than that, though. We talked about getting out of overwhelm. We talked about the first steps that we want to take to get out of overwhelm. And we also really got deep into sort of the big picture meaning of peaceful parenting and what it means to be a peaceful parent. So please welcome Rachel Rainbolt. She is the founder of Sage Family and is a gentle parenting, natural homeschooling, and simple living mentor. With a master's degree in marital and family therapy, she has spent decades guiding thousands of overwhelmed families to peace and joy. Rachel works from the Pacific Northwest, where she lives wild and free in connection with her 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in their fixer-upper on the beach. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is fun. I got to be on your podcast, and now you get to be on my podcast. And everyone should check out the Sage Family podcast. It's really wonderful.
Thank you. The conversation we shared for my podcast was so lovely, and I was really excited that we had another excuse to talk. And now, we're going to have to make something else up. Somebody else start a podcast and have us both on so we can chat more.
We can do some Instagram lives or something. We'll have to chat about that. So I asked you to come on because when I was looking at what you do, what really jumped out at me is that you help families simplify. And just last week, we had a question in my Facebook group, which I'm just going to share with you because I think it's a really nice sort of jumping off point for talking about how to simplify. So this parent says, does anyone actually find time and energy for all that is required on top of jobs, housework, meals, errands, kids to and from school and activities, one-on-one time with each kid, cooperative games, rough housing, getting them laughing and crying, meeting every issue with patience, calm, empathy, problem solving? When and how is all of this supposed to get done every day? I am so overwhelmed. Aren't you overwhelmed hearing that?
Yes. As she's listing the things, I'm like feeling the weight get heavier and heavier on top of me. So first, just like some acknowledgement and some validation of that's a lot. And when we feel overwhelmed, like our anxiety increases, depression increases, and our ability to follow through on our intentions decreases. So when we feel that overwhelm, which is well-intentioned, right? Like all those things that she's saying are lovely things. But when we put ourselves in that position of overwhelm, then it actually reduces our success in all the ways that are meaningful to us. So first, just some acknowledgement and validation that, my goodness, that's a lot. And then B, like if you're not seeing the progress that you want to see in all of those areas, that would be completely understandable because that is so much. So I think the lens that you're having me on to really kind of focus on today is simplicity. And most people, when they hear simplicity, they think of like decluttering the house. And that is certainly part of it. But just as big are parts like your time, people, energy, and really parenting even. Like a lot of the items that she listed were related to parenting. One of the things I really help parents with is simplifying that parenting part. So the mainstream parenting paradigm really comes with so much control and manipulation, and it's very outcome oriented. A plus B equals C. It's very behavioral. With peaceful parenting, gentle parenting, I really try to help people simplify all of that. Like it's not a list of to-dos. It's just a posture. It's just a way of being that you embody as you show up in connection with these people. Gentle parenting, peaceful parenting, it's really about simplifying away all of those shoulds and the should nots to just get down to the heart of what it is to be in connection, one human being to another human being. How can that connection feel good and be respectful and be kind and be empathetic? So I would recommend for this person kind of a mindset shift that to be, it sounds like she's a bit of like an achiever, like to be a good quote unquote
A
peaceful
perfectionist,
parent.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
achiever, perfectionist. I'm like an Enneagram 2 wing 1 and 3, which is like perfectionist and achiever, but with like that heart center. So I totally relate to this
I think that's
question.
what my Enneagram is also.
Really? Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be my natural bent. Like, I'm going to be the best peaceful parent. I'm going to do all the things, but that's not sustainable. And when we put the bar for success so high like that, we're not going to meet that bar and we're going to feel poorly, about ourselves. And it's just not going to play out. It's not possible.
Yeah, her expectations are really high for herself, right?
Yeah. And like, even if you did all of those things, even if you managed to accomplish them all in one day, that wouldn't be better than just sitting on the floor in the middle of the room, choosing joy and peace and contentment. And each time a kid comes over, interacting with them in an empathetic way. Like
Mhm.
accomplishing a bunch of tasks, even if they're peaceful parenting tasks, does not produce a better peaceful parent or a better interaction with your kids or a better kid than just holding that posture as you move through the day. So some of those things she talked about, like one-on-one time, that can be tremendously valuable and helpful in filling a kid's cup. I didn't do that every day. Like I
Yeah,
have 3 kids and every single day of my life, I did not spend one-on-one time with each of them.
for
Like
sure.
that would not have been possible.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's the question of like, if you're running yourself ragged and into the ground trying to do all these things that are supposed to be beneficial, it's not going to be beneficial. If it's like
No.
a super stress point to try and get special time with each kid, maybe just do it on the weekends, or
Yeah.
maybe one kid a day, but really adjusting and lowering those expectations so that you can, be more present.
I tried to look for opportunities to be present in a focused way with each kid throughout the day.
Hmm.
So, for example, if I'm brushing a kid's teeth, I would be all in with
Hmm.
helping them brush their teeth, like with eye contact and skin to skin contact and being playful and giving them control in silly ways. And, so it doesn't have to necessarily be an additional thing. Again, it's just sort of a way of showing up in the things that you're already doing.
So the
And it,
simplicity mindset is about being present, it sounds like.
yeah, present and intentional and letting go of like, a lot of people have heard of the Pareto principle that like 80% of your efforts produce like 20% of your outcome or your gains. And there are a lot of different ways to kind of phrase that. Like you use 20% of the items in your home and not 80%. You use and occupy 20% of your house and you don't really move around through 80% of it. In terms of the parenting, like 20% of what you're doing produces 80% of the results. And so really like let go of 80% of those things that you think that you should quote unquote be doing and just go all in with the 20% that is essential, that produces the best results in terms of how you feel and how your kids feel.
So
Like
how do you
just
tell the
go all
difference?
in.
How do you tell the difference between the 80% and the 20%?
Great question. Like the first criteria that I would use is like, who am I doing this for? So if I'm doing this because like I saw it on a chart online or because that expert said I should or because my mother-in-law made a comment that I should be doing this, those kinds of things are easy for me to let go. So is this a need that I have identified in my kid or in myself? Like that's really the starting point. If I have identified that my kid needs to be outside every day, that helps them to be their best selves, that's a need that they have, then that would stay on the list. Like that's a need that I've identified in my kid. Or if there's a need that I have identified in myself, like this tea before I podcast, I make tea, right? Like
Hmm.
it's like a simple thing. That's something I choose to continue doing. It feels good for me. So just where is this idea that you should be doing this thing coming from? And then let go of the things that are not coming from a need that you and your children have. And I want to say too, on the growth front, like a lot of the things in that list that she mentioned seem to be like things that she wants to work on to grow as a peaceful parent or to improve the family culture or the atmosphere of the home. when I'm trying to help parents to grow and evolve and elevate, we focus on just one thing at a time.
Right.
Just one thing. Sometimes even just one time. So like whatever it is that you identify as something that would improve your family culture, the atmosphere of your home, your inner experience of your life, whatever, focus on just one thing and then focus on just one time. So say just one time today, I am going to show up in this new way instead of falling into the habit of showing up in this old way. Just one time. So all the rest of the times throughout the day, I'm going to do it the old way. But this one time, I'm going to show up in this new way and I'm going to do it and it's going to feel awkward and I'm not going to do it very well and it's going to feel uncomfortable and weird. And then tomorrow I'm going to show up and do it again. And then the next day I'm going to show up. And then maybe I'll do it 2 times and then maybe 3 times and then maybe 4 times. And then the more you do it, the more natural it becomes and the easier it becomes.
So what would be an example of a one thing that maybe someone that you've worked with has chosen?
Yeah. So for example, when I'm doing coaching, like I'll have people send me videos. And so I can identify, I get sort of all the raw data and I can help people identify, okay, here are some things, these small shifts, I call them, like we'll make like this small shift and then we'll see how that can change everything about this really hard moment or these interactions. So it might be something as simple as first connecting. So like just validating and reflecting what the child is saying before you move into any collaborating or problem solving. So I might say, okay, so every time things start to feel like your child feels triggered or they flip into dysregulation or you start to feel overwhelmed, sit down on the floor, take a deep breath, and just reflect and validate everything they say. So like just do that one time.
Mm-hmm.
Once a day, that's it. Then the rest of the times do it the way you've been doing it before, just one time, then 2 times, then 3 times. And the more you do it, the more natural and easier it becomes. And those small shifts, their effect like spirals out to make really big changes within yourself and within the relationship. And once you strengthen those muscles of like peaceful parenting, mindfulness, showing up with empathy, all those kinds of things, then those muscles are bigger and it's even easier to make more changes.
There's a quote on your website that I think would be helpful. It's sort of your version of the Marie Kondo question, when she says, does this item spark joy? You say, simple living is a lifestyle of intention that invites us to hold only what supports a meaningful life and let go of the rest. So that's, to me, that's sort of that question of ordering isn't the right word, but I will use that for now. But like maybe doing like an inventory of what are the things that are really meaningful in our lives. And the thing that jumped out at me from that Facebook post was all the activities, driving the kids from the activities. And it might be my personal prejudice, but I think that families are way overscheduled. So maybe you look at the activities that your family's doing and you think, which of these activities are really meaningful and important for the people involved? Or are we just doing it because our neighbors are like, oh, you're not putting him in soccer? Like, or you're not, I love that phrase, putting him in or putting them in, that's what I would, oh, are you putting them in hockey? No, I'm not putting them in hockey because no one has expressed any interest in playing hockey, right? So maybe that could be part of the questioning in that overwhelm and the listing of all of the things. Well, which of these things are supporting you in making your life most meaningful?
Nothing is beyond question. So like we can move minimalism through like time, through money, through all these different spheres of life. But really the main message that you have to keep reminding yourself is that nothing is beyond question. Because when I start doing this work with families, they might come to me for, to declutter stuff in their house or whatever it is. But then I start pushing them to question things that they thought were beyond question. Like, well, my kid has to do X, they have to do tutoring in order to be successful in this program they're doing in order to what? Like basically what I try and help parents do and what I find helpful is to get at the fears behind these choices. If they didn't do this, what might happen? And to keep following down, keep moving down that rabbit hole until you get to those ultimate fears that are driving these choices, because you are under no obligation to do anything, like nothing. Like you and your kid could just sit in an empty room together and like cuddle, and that's enough, like you don't need furniture, so like just questioning every single thing that you do. And you're totally right, children today are so overscheduled. It makes individual quirks that they have turn into legitimate pathologies. I'm a big like neurodiversity fan, but all neurodivergences, there are challenges and there are strengths, and what kind of determines which side of the coin your child exists in is the context around them, like the lifestyle that you're putting them in. And so kids are so overscheduled, and rushing is experienced by the system as a threat. Like, so to keep that in mind, things that seem like, oh, hockey, this is something happy. Not necessarily, your kid's not necessarily experiencing it that way. So just that nothing is beyond question, I think, is helpful to remember. Everything is on the chopping block. You can say no to birthday parties on weekends. You can say no to Aunt Susie's retirement party. You can say no to, this activity, to this, all of it. All of it is up for question. You can say no to everything.
Okay, so two things that I just had like a bit of a lightning bolt when you said the body experiences rushing as a threat. Have you noticed how many times parents come and say transitions are hard for my kid?
Yes. Yep.
So, I think that's probably a big part of it, right? The transition is like there's rushing and stress and like, come on, we got to go. We're going to be late. We're going to be late. And then the kid gets overwhelmed, fight, flight, or freeze, starts acting out. So I think that's probably a big reason why transitions are so hard.
Absolutely. You have to slow down to speed up. Mm-hmm. It seems counterintuitive in a hard moment when you're saying, come on, get your shoes. Let's go. Let's go. To drop everything in your hands, sit down on the floor beside your child, take a really deep breath, make eye contact, smile, and ask, how can I help?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like even just to say those words slowly.
Yeah.
How can I help?
I love that.
Just that whole conversation that stems from that might take 60 seconds, whereas trying to rush them out the door and they're going boneless and screaming and, pulling their feet away from the shoes. I mean, that whole thing could take 30 minutes, whereas like a 60-second slowdown can help you get out the door in minutes.
Yeah. And increasing connection, increase safety and removing the threat there. So Rachel, the other thing that I was thinking about with what you just said is when you said that nothing is without question. All of the things of what we need to do, what we have to do, what we think we need to do or think we have to do. And I'm wondering where this mom is like putting herself on this list.
Absolutely. It all starts with, the meeting of needs is how I like to, like the language that I like to use around like gentle parenting, peaceful parenting. It's not necessarily, it's not just meeting the kids' needs. Like it has to go both ways. I often describe it like a Venn diagram. So we have the circle of the kids' needs and we have the circle of our needs, and we want to live in the overlap. So it just takes some creativity, but in all of the years that I have done this work, all of the thousands of families I've worked with, and in my own life with my 3 children, I have never had a moment where there was no overlap. Like, so it just takes some creativity, but really this whole thing is about honoring everybody's needs, both the needs in the interaction. So we need to be holding space for our needs as well.
Mm-hmm. And our need might be to, make scrambled eggs and baby carrots for dinner and not do special time, but everybody pile on the couch and, watch a funny show together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when I think about simplicity, I often think about schedule first, and then I often think about space. We've talked a lot about schedule so far. In terms of space, or what other areas do you think that we should be talking about today for families to help them?
I think the space is a big one because in a family, the home environment really does play a powerful role. Like I often end up working with families around like money and their own relationships with like their extended family and friendships and even community and things like that. But really the home environment, children absorb their environment and they reflect it back as behavior. So that's something that's really helpful to keep in mind. We do the same, though it's not as obvious. Children are just more sensitive to it. But for adults, it's the same. So simplifying your home environment is one of those like easy, practical, physical things that you can do to improve your relationship with your kid, to improve your kids' chances of success and state of being and state of mind and emotional state. Like you improve their emotional regulation. Again, it like reduces anxiety. I find it really therapeutic, even just the process of like decluttering and letting things go. Like when things feel out of control in my life and I can physically, like tangibly control my environment by letting things go and simplifying. Like if something is really complicated in my life and I simplify my home environment, it feels incredibly therapeutic. And it helps to like keep me in alignment like with this value of simplicity, which just reduces overwhelm, it reduces anxiety. So definitely like a good rule of thumb is like to get rid of half of the belongings in each space, which most people might think like that sounds crazy. But I work with a lot of very intentional families for whom like minimalism is kind of already on their radar. And that's typically how much I help them let go of. So even families that might tend to feel like I don't like spend frivolously. We're not hoarders. I still usually recommend letting go of half of everything, particularly for kids. They play better. Like I'm a homeschooler too. I advocate for like natural homeschooling, and the home environment plays a big role in that. And so if there's just too much stuff, and one way to know is if your kid's dumping, like if they're just dumping boxes, that's a sign like there's too much. They're overwhelmed. But you need to simplify things. Have like one invitation, no more than like 3 sets or bins in a space. That's plenty. And I think one of the things too, when you were talking about hockey, to keep in mind is time. So we often conceptualize, oh, well, like I want my child to play hockey or I want them to have all these art supplies, but they don't need to do the things at once. They don't need to have all the things at once. So we might have, oil pastels out today, and then, maybe we have like 3 different art materials just in our home all together in a whole season. And then I'll swap with some friends and then we'll give them these art supplies and we'll take some of theirs. Or like in my local Buy Nothing group, I'll post that I'm looking for some things and I'll post to give away some things. So keep that like that longer term time. Like if you want your kid to be exposed to and have access to puppets, great, but that doesn't mean they have to be in your house all the time forever.
This is a question I get a lot. When you do decide that you have too much stuff and you want to do a little bit of a purge and, get rid of some things, what do you do when the kids are like, no, I don't want to get rid of that? Or they're objecting or they don't agree that we should be getting rid of half the toys?
Yeah, I find that it really depends on the kids. So there are some basic strategies that can be helpful, like having a space boundary. For example, I might say like, okay, here is the bin for all of the Legos. Like, so pick which Legos you want as long as they fit in. You can keep whatever ones can fit in this bin and then we'll donate any that don't fit. It helps kids to be able to kind of prioritize which ones they want. It gives them a lot of control over the situation. And then all you're doing is providing like a space boundary. It might be here's the bin for stuffed animals. Like whatever stuffed animals fit in the bin can stay and you can pick which ones go in there. And then we give away the rest. One thing that I find works really well is a last chance feature. So if I pull out some toys that I notice aren't being played with anymore, I will bring them upstairs, put them like right in the middle of the living room on the coffee table and say, okay, last chance for these toys. And the kids know that means they are welcome to play with them for as long as they want. And then the day they don't play with them anymore, they're donated. Like we don't talk about it. I don't make a big deal about a big show of it. I just post them in the Buy Nothing group and set them out for another family to take. So that I find that like transitional period works really well in my family and with my kids, gives them a chance to kind of say goodbye and play to the fullest of their heart's content. And then it's not until like the day they don't play with it that I then donate it.
I like the last chance. I like the space. What did you call it?
Space boundary.
Space boundary. But I do disagree with you about Lego. I don't think we'd ever have too much Lego. Like I did have a decade of my 2 older kids, my boys, playing with Lego every single day for hours and hours and hours. And I think that they pretty much used all that Lego all the time, and we still have it. But the stuffy thing, though, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, well, and like whatever what they're into, like if they're into Legos, and in my family, we've had the same thing. Kids will tend to go through seasons where they're kind of obsessed with a certain thing. And so I'll let go of all the other stuff that they're not into to hold more space for that thing they're super into. So for Lego, like we built these under the bed storage boxes on wheels that pull out. So they are literally the size of like a twin bed. And you can pull it out. It has all the Legos and it has dividers and it's great. So that whatever the thing your kid is into, you can go all in with that, but only if you are willing to let go of all of the stuff that doesn't matter to them right now, that isn't important, that isn't something they're really into and playing with.
Yeah, I think for that decade, every single birthday and every single holiday gift was Lego. So we
Yep.
didn't really have much of an issue with the other stuff. I had two things that I found worked really well for my kids when they were little and we were getting rid of things, and feel free to use these if they work for you. But one was that they would have a sale where they would take all of their old stuff that we wanted to get rid of and sell it for, like, put a table out in front of the house or a blanket and sell it for like 5 cents each. And then they felt like it wasn't just, getting without their power, right? That it was, we were just getting rid of it. And another thing was to give it away to somebody that they knew, like a younger cousin or a neighbor or somebody. So they felt they might not want to get rid of it necessarily, but they felt good about where it was going.
Yeah, those are good tips. I love posting things in the Buy Nothing group because the families will often send an image of their kids playing with it, like after the fact, to say thank you. And so, like, showing that to the kids, they get that look on their face, like, aw, like,
Yeah.
it was sitting in a box on our shelf for a year. And like, look at these kids. They they don't have as much as we have, and they're loving playing with these things. So, no, I think those were really great tips.
I love the Buy Nothing group. My kids are old enough that that wasn't really an option when they were little. we didn't
Yeah,
have
totally.
we didn't have Facebook groups. We didn't even have Facebook.
So I get it. My oldest is 16, so
All right.
it wasn't around when she was younger.
Yeah. So, what do you find that folks get blocked about when you're talking about simplicity and simplifying the routine or relationships or space or whatever? What do people get blocked about?
A sense of obligation. Like they get stuck behind all of those shoulds, whether that's relationships, commitments, stuff that they're keeping in their house. It's so funny how we can get so stuck behind shoulds, even around things as simple as like how many towels you keep in your house. Like, it's things that seem to not matter. People can get really hooked into the way our minds work. Like, I was working with this one father who was insistent that they had to have a crib, even though they were like bed sharing and we were doing sleep coaching and stuff, and like really digging under the fears and the whys. It was because, like, when he was a teenager, he saw an advertisement for a nursery and he like formed this impression in his mind that that is what he was going to provide, for his kid one day. Like, so many of the choices that we make are based on things that don't fit for us anymore, or don't really make a whole lot of sense once we start digging underneath them and seeing where these things are, sense of obligation is really coming from. So just helping families from a very empathetic and non-judgmentally curious space to question all of the things. Everything in your environment is up for question. Everything in your schedule is up for question. So just, that's where I see people getting the most stuck. I want to empower people to be really brave and non-judgmentally curious in questioning why they are keeping or doing all of the things that they own and do.
Yeah, like the should, immediately I thought of, you mentioned you don't have to go to the birthday parties, but a lot of people think, well, we should go because they invited us. And like any of those we should go because we were invited, or that we should put them in hockey because otherwise they're not going to have the, time with their friends, or they're going to, people will judge us if we don't have them in hockey, or whatever that should is that's behind that.
Yeah, even just digging out and laying out like each one of those. So like, okay, one of the things you mentioned was like a fear of loss of friendship. So let's like, is that valid? Let's really look into that. Is hockey literally the only time in their lives when they could be in connection with other kids that are with other children? Like,
Mhm.
Maybe it is and maybe it isn't. And if it is, like, say you're rural homeschoolers and there are no other children in your community, you have no programs near you, and hockey is the only way to make that happen, then that might be a valid conversation. And we can try and look at like what are other ways where you can get that socialization in.
Or maybe hockey is the thing you keep in. And by the
Yeah,
way, no
exactly.
shade to hockey families. Like, I just chose that randomly as something.
Yes, yes. Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so maybe you decide that it is valid. But again, that like 80-20, 80% of the stuff tends to be not serving you in this season of your life. And anything that is not 100% in alignment with your values, just be ruthless in letting it go. And what that does is it creates the space for the things that are in alignment with your values to flourish. We need that space.
Do you have any sort of best practices for getting started? Because like I think of like, is there the equivalent of like a brain dump for like your schedule and your stuff? Or is some way that you do like an accounting process of like where you're at to start with?
I just tell people to start small. Like just pick one thing and start small. So it could be like the bathroom. We tend not to have very many sentimental things in a bathroom. Or if the bathroom is big and overwhelming, it could be a drawer.
Mm-hmm.
Like just I want to like meet people wherever they're at. So like you want to be uncomfortable because that's the space for growth, but not so overwhelmed that you shut down. So there's this like sweet zone of like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. If you're feeling uncomfortable, that's good. But if you're feeling so overwhelmed that you can't make any progress, then that's too much. So
Mm-hmm.
simplify it, right? Like simplify it. You can even, I find that setting a timer is really helpful. Like 15-minute timer. So literally set a timer for 15 minutes and clean out one space or do as much as you can in one drawer. Or even if we're talking about your schedule, like set a timer for 15 minutes and or you can choose like you can even pick like a number, like I'm going to eliminate 5 things from our calendar for the next month. You can look at it that way. I really find it's more inspiring to kind of go in the reverse and imagine like you are in a white void, like floating in a white void. There's nothing in the universe with you. What things would you begin to add in? So, like I was working with a coaching client yesterday and she said nature. Like I would definitely like be in nature. Okay, great. Let's add in the nature. What would you add in next? Well, I would add in like my husband and my kids. Okay, let's add in your husband and your kids. Well, what would you add next? So we're sort of going from a more positive place. And you can do that in your spaces too.
Mm-hmm.
If this one of my like rules of thumb that I find is helpful is that if everything in this room was burned in a fire, what would you need to replace? What would you be devastated to have lost? Like you would literally cry. So
Mm-hmm.
that might be like, I would need to replace the social security card, so okay, I have to keep that. I would be devastated to have lost like the baby blanket that my deceased mother handmade for me. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we'll keep that. But like 80% of the belongings in that room, you wouldn't replace them and you wouldn't be sad that they were gone. So if that's the case, let them go.
Yeah, I love that. When you were talking about just starting with one small thing, I don't know, have you read the book Burnout by
Mm-mm.
Emily and Amelia Nagoski? It's a really
Mm-mm.
great book, but one thing that they talk about, so burnout is, I forget now what all of it's like compassion fatigue, emotional
Mm.
exhaustion, and hopelessness. Those are the 3 feelings of burnout. And they said that when you're feeling hopeless, in that sense of like overwhelmed, nothing that I do will ever matter, ever make a difference. One thing that you can do is you can trick your brain by just doing something small to get yourself out of that sense of hopelessness. So just one small, and it reminded me of they said clean out a drawer and just do one little thing. And then
Yep.
that can change your whole outlook on your agency, basically, and
Yeah.
like how much power you have over the situation.
Changes the inertia.
Yeah, and I think that's what that mom, coming back to our question, that sense of overwhelm that she was feeling, I think we could also say she sounded super, super burnt out
Yeah.
and that she was looking at everything all at once. Like, how can I do all of these things? And, I think this is like a perfect closing moment to your point, just one thing. Like, instead of
Yeah.
thinking, how can I tackle everything all at once? What can I do just to do one thing different?
Yeah, don't. Like if the question is how can I do all the things, my simple one word answer is don't.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite thing about peaceful parenting is that it is a way of being.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a list of things that you must do. It is simply a way of being.
Yeah.
So that doesn't require any time or any outward energy. Just embody that state of mindfulness and empathy. Keep your compass set toward connection. All those other tools that you're mentioning that you feel are shoulds on your time are really just tools that you can pull out to help you to meet a specific need, like in a hard moment. But let all of that go and just be.
It reminds me of attachment parenting. And, the Sears came up with their
Mm-hmm.
whole list of, bed sharing and baby wearing and breastfeeding on demand and all of those things. And people got so confused that they had to do all of those things to meet their children's attachment needs. And I think we have to remind ourselves that you can meet attachment needs without bed sharing. If bed sharing doesn't work for you, you can meet attachment needs, blah, blah, blah. So I think we can, when there is like an approach, like, attachment parenting or peaceful parenting, we can get caught up in what's supposed to be the tools that can help us and think that the whole approach is the tools, which is, I think, what you're saying. And it's not. And, peaceful parenting is really a set of relationship principles, right? It's not about you have to do special time. Well, I don't even want to say have to, but working on connection with our child is the goal. Special time is one way to get there, but it's not the only way to get there.
Yeah. Keeping my compass set to connection for me is what attachment parenting, gentle parenting, peaceful parenting is. It's just a way of being within myself and then keeping my compass set toward connection with my children. And then collaboration is sort of my go-to for making decisions or moving through hard moments. Like that, if I were to distill it down to its simplest form. So all of those other things, like 15 minutes a day I never embodied those tools, or I never took on those tools as shoulds or to-dos, because that just does more harm than good. It's more like, oh, my child is inviting me to play. My instinct is to go do this other thing. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to let them lead the play for 10 minutes before I have to go start making dinner. It's like knowing that those things are beneficial are helpful to know, but they're not necessarily to-dos. That would be crushing. If I could just like reach out to that mama and like gather up all of those things and take them away for her, to just simplify it, to just, hey, show up as the person you want to be and step toward connection at every invitation. Like, and whatever that means for you in today, like, is correct.
I love that. So I'm going to ask you a question that maybe would have been better at the beginning, but were you always a simplicity parent? Your oldest is 16. How old is your youngest?
My kids are 16, 13, and about to turn 10.
Oh, okay. So I've got 20, 17, 14. So I'm 4 years ahead of you, but same age gap. How did you come to this way of living?
Well, I basically like got degrees in mothering. Like I started off like determined to be like the best mother that there was. And that included a whole truckload of shoulds that were crushing me. So I totally relate to this mom's question that you read. And very early on with my first baby, when I was trying to do everything right and it was kind of killing us for the first month or so, I had kind of this moment where I was like clinging to the monitor and my baby was crying and I was crying. And my husband was like, if they want you to be with them and you want to be with them, why don't you just go be with them? And that was like this light bulb moment for me.
What a common sense, awesome question for him to ask you.
Yes. So I just kind of threw the monitor aside and that set me on a whole different path. So then it was reading all the things and learning all the things and really just tuning into this relationship and these humans that I'm in connection with. And first it was like gentle parenting, then natural homeschooling, and then minimalism. So those were kind of like the three big values or movements or whatever ideas that kind of created the lifestyle that I live. Minimalism was a big part of that, reducing overwhelm. I have 3 kids. I'm an entrepreneur. I have neurodiversities in my family. Like the potential for life to be busy and complicated and overwhelming, and my life isn't. And minimalism is really, gets the credit for that, of keeping our lives simple, and it keeps everything feeling good in our life in alignment with our values, which is ultimately kind of the formula for living a meaningful and fulfilling life.
I think that I was also minimalist parent when my kids were little, but it was probably because we didn't have any money. So it was kind of had to be, right? Like we had to find things to do that were more home-based, and we didn't have money to put kids in lessons or activities. And, we got presents from grandparents, and that was what we counted on for most of the kids' gifts. And I look back and I think that was probably like a really nice like blessing in disguise. And I'm not trying to glamorize being poor, but for us, it was nice in that it helped us really connect to what the important things were for us.
Yep, I can definitely relate. We chose to, I graduated from college, got married, and then we chose to have our first child when I was 22. So we, same, we did not, we had not amassed any kind of wealth at 22, graduated from college, freshly married and making babies. So for sure, that was part of, I'm sure, what led me to kind of see the benefits of that. And then every time I would try and work up from there and think, oh, my kids should have X, Y, and Z and start acquiring more, we started to get off track. And then I would let that stuff go, whether it be in our schedule or in relationships or in our house, and then things would start to feel better again.
Mm-hmm. Well, was there anything that you wish I had asked you about simplicity and family life that I didn't ask you that you'd like to add?
I would just add that simplicity, whenever things are feeling hard, like if we're in a hard moment or feeling stuck, like in my family or with one of my kids, simplicity is always the first go-to for us, which is funny because it seems like the most superficial of all of the values and the things that I do in the work that I talk about. But I find that it's an essential primer before you can even get to the heart of what the unmet need is. You have to simplify things first. So I would just encourage people that's to add that to their toolbox, that if things are ever not working, simplify first, and then it is so much easier to see what the needs are that are at the heart of these challenges that you're experiencing.
I love that. And finally, the question that I ask all my guests, which is, if you could go back to that younger parent self and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
I have so much. That's hard to pick just one. Trust. I think ultimately we go back to trust. Trust in your children, trust in yourself, trust in children. Most of our childhoods don't teach us that we are not to be trusted. So we become adults who don't trust ourselves and we don't know how to trust our children. And I've worked really hard at that. And that has been one of the things that has delivered the most benefit. And it's really held true and it's really paid off and delivered so much in dividends. So that's what I would tell my younger self, that it's okay to fully trust your children on every front, that they will be who they were meant to be. They will get all that they need. Just trust that if you show up in alignment with your values in the present moment and honor their needs as they come, everything will work out fine. You can trust in that. It works.
Beautiful. That was a good one to choose.
Thank you.
Can you tell our listeners where they can find you and find out about your offerings?
Yes, so sagefamily.com is my website. I have the Village, which is a membership there where we have group coaching and sort of a community forum that's lovely. I also have online courses like the bucket system for homeschooling, minimalist wardrobe course, which is, taps into that minimalism piece, all kinds of fun stuff there. And I have my Sage Family podcast everywhere where podcasts can be found. And I'm on Instagram a lot too. So sage.family on Instagram. That's a good place to get to know me if we're not yet connected.
Yay. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.